December 9th. Ms. Crisante, if you would call the roll call, please.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez. He's trying to log in right now. He's not showing up in the attendee list, so we will work on getting him in, but he's close by. And Chair Jordan.
Here. And thank you for that. Stay right there, and we will go to public comment for items that are not on the agenda item. Take it away, please, Ms. Crisante. Oh, and I'll just help you out here. This is our first transition meeting to Zoom rather than GoToMeeting. So if we burp a couple times trying to help you on public comment or just fumble a little bit, please bear with us because it's new to this group of people. Go ahead, Nicole.
Yes, and we'll update our slide for public comment. If you are here to speak on items on the agenda, now is your time to raise your hand within the app and we will call on you. Currently, there are no attendees.
Okay, so we will close public comment and we'll go to our single item today, which is a discussion on potential amendments to the municipal code pertaining to solid waste management regulations. And I'll invite staff, Mr. Rowell, I think you're up. Please join us.
Thank you, Chair Jordan and Ordinance Committee members. My name is Dan Rowell, and it's a pleasure to be here presenting to you today. I am an environmental specialist in our Environmental Services Division, and this presentation is about updates to our Santa Barbara Municipal Code, Chapter 7.16, as it pertains to solid waste management. Next slide, please. So today we're before you to consider a recommendation that the Ordinance Committee consider an ordinance of the Council of the City of Santa Barbara amending the municipal code by adding a new chapter 7.16 pertaining to solid waste management and by repealing chapter 7.16 entitled garbage and refuse collection. And I wanted to clarify that we are recommending that these changes occur simultaneously to be effective by January 1st, 2022. Next slide, please. So our project goals for updating our chapter of the Santa Barbara Municipal Code were motivated by two main items. And the first was to improve the readability and understanding of our existing code language, as much of it was adopted a couple decades ago. And the second project goal was to achieve compliance under Senate Bill 1383 for short-lived climate pollutants, which I will get into more later on this presentation. Next slide, please. So our existing chapter 7.16, the majority of that code language was adopted back in 1972 when Santa Barbara and the solid waste management industry was a very different place. So our existing language is not reflective of these modern solid waste management practices that we deal with and utilize today. And it does not embody or address the mandatory requirements for recycling and organics recycling under state law. Next slide, please. So the proposed language that is before you today, we have updated it so that it reflects these modern solid waste management practices. And more importantly, it is going to provide the local enforcement authority for mandatory requirements under state law. Today, we do not have the enforcement authority to deal with these state level requirements, but under 1383, we are required to pass an ordinance to give us local enforcement authority. So this proposed language will allow us to achieve compliance with Senate Bill 1383 for short-lived climate pollutants. Next slide, please. So what is Senate Bill 1383? It embodies California's short-lived climate pollutant reduction strategy. And this is part of the California statewide climate pillars that were enacted a number of years ago, but the jurisdiction requirements under this legislation become effective January 1st, 2022. And on the left side of the slide here, you'll see back in 2017, across the entire state of California, we disposed of roughly 27 million tons of organic waste. So we have a lot of organic waste that when disposed of improperly will create short-lived climate pollutants like methane. So to tackle and reduce that climate pollutant, this bill establishes statewide organic waste recycling and surplus food recovery requirements. Next slide, please. And all of those new requirements allow us to reduce the amount of methane gas produced from the disposal of organic waste in landfill environments. Methane gas is a super pollutant in terms of its impacts to climate change, which we all have experienced very intimately in this area in the form of drought and wildfires. So 1383 is calling on all jurisdictions of California to tackle this, and every jurisdiction in California is required to adopt a municipal code update like the one before you today. Next slide, please. So 1383 outlines a number of responsibilities for jurisdictions to achieve compliance. The two that are circled in red on the slide before you are the ones that are specifically addressed by this code update. So further along in this presentation, we will touch in on our updates to our sustainable procurement policy, which will allow us to comply with the procurement of recyclable and recovered organic products. But also giving us the local enforcement authority to monitor compliance and conduct enforcement for these mandatory requirements. I'm happy to announce that our team has been working on all of these items over the last couple of years. This is really one of the last pieces of the puzzle to achieving compliance with 1383. Next slide, please. So what are the major updates to our code language? Well, there's three major sections that were updated. The first is including the organics recycling requirements for commercial and multifamily properties. So for commercial properties to achieve compliance, they do need to be a part of our food scraps composting yellow bin program that many of you have seen around town. And multifamilies need to subscribe to green waste or our yard trimming pickup service to achieve compliance with those organics. In terms of our edible food recovery requirements, we have implemented some record-keeping updates for edible food generators, as well as the food recovery organizations and services. And lastly, we are updating our sustainable purchasing and procurement policy to achieve the minimum requirements under 1383. Next slide, please. So I wanted to dive into these major updates in terms of who is affected by them. When we look at our commercial businesses that are affected by our mandatory organics recycling requirements, I'm happy to announce that we've been doing outreach for years in more of a voluntary participation focus. So our team has identified 972 unique businesses in town that would be affected by this local ordinance. But I'm happy to announce 87% have already worked with our team and are already participating in that program and considered compliant. Next slide, please. And this story is the same for our affected multifamily properties who need to add green waste service for compliance. So our team has been doing outreach and identified 1,105 total properties in our community with a current rate of 84% compliance. Next slide, please. In terms of our edible food generators, or those who are required to participate in a food recovery program, we believe there to be 99 affected generators in our community, but largely all of these generators have some record keeping occurring today. We are just formalizing that they need to have food recovery written agreements on file, and they need to keep track of donation details like the weight of the donation and what was donated, along with a couple other items. Next slide, please. And on the receiving end, our food recovery organizations, our team believes there's 41 affected organizations in town with the same updates to the record keeping requirements for the having the food recovery written agreement on hand and keeping track of donation details. For both of these entities, groups, for food recovery, we've been working for months now with all of the jurisdictions in the county to establish a county-wide food recovery network. And I'm happy to announce that we are in the final stages of formalizing that arrangement with the county and the other jurisdictions to get this implemented and to achieve compliance with these regs. So for the edible food generators and the food recovery organizations, we've got a lot of resources to help them with this transition, and everyone's been really supportive of this so far. Next slide, please. So in summary, the code update before you today intends to improve readability and understanding and ultimately to achieve compliance with Senate Bill 1383. So with that, I have the recommendation up on the screen, and I'd love to open the floor for any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Ms. Snedden. Ms. Snedden.
Thank you. Well, this is exciting development. I'm really happy to hear that. I have two questions. Neither of them will affect my support of moving forward this, but one is, what happens with food recovery food? What is is there a goal for what happens with it, or is it just to divert it from the landfill? Or if you could talk a little bit about that.
Thank you, Councilmember Snedden. The Food Recovery Network intends to do two things. The first is we don't want to waste food. It's a huge issue kind of at the national level. So that program will help us reduce the amount of organics being disposed of in landfills, but at the same time, it's going to allow us to tackle and really route food to people experiencing hunger in our local community. So those are the two main goals of the Food Recovery Network.
Fantastic. And then if it's in partnership with the county, is that food rerouted to try and stay within a city where it's produced, or just countywide distributed? Or if you know, yeah.
We are going to try to keep donations as local as possible, but the reality of food recovery, you know, one of the largest players in our county is the food bank that operates across jurisdictional lines. So we're working with these partners to leverage their networks, but ultimately we want to maximize food recovery to get it to those in need. And if that means bringing Santa Maria food donation into our community or bringing it elsewhere in the county, I think that it's going to really work well as a collaborative approach.
Thank you. It's really exciting. And then one more question about the record keeping requirements. Is there a scenario where record keeping is too onerous, so people just throw it out instead?
Thank you, Councilmember Snedden. The record keeping requirements, I don't believe are a burden. Right now, edible food generators are likely keeping records to take advantage of federal tax deduction opportunities. So this is really just a formalization of what they're already keeping track of. And the agreements are our way of ensuring that they have somewhere to donate this food and they have that arrangement on file.
Okay, thank you so much.
And thank you. I have Mr. Gutierrez.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple questions about where the data came from that you presented in this slideshow. Were there specific organizations, or did you hire a consultant to do that? Thank
you, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez. Our team here at the City of Santa Barbara has been working collaboratively with all the jurisdictions in the county, like I mentioned. Kind of at the earlier stages of this conversation, we moved forward with the Community Environmental Council to do an initial needs and capacity assessment, which is where the edible food generators and the food recovery organizations and services, that's where that list came from. And that was done by the Community Environmental Council and Edgar Allen and Associates. In terms of the affected commercial and multifamily properties, that was all generated in-house by our business outreach team.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just have another question about outreach. How much outreach are you planning on doing to notify the community, and in particular, the Spanish-speaking community?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gutierrez. We don't intend on flipping the page and starting a lot of enforcement. We already do a lot of outreach with the code updates before you. So we are going to continue our robust outreach program to achieve as much voluntary compliance as we can. This is really just a tool in our belt for those unresponsive entities in our community. But also, again, we are required to pass and get local enforcement authority under this Senate bill. But we do have a fluent Spanish speaker in our office who has been tremendous at translating all of our outreach materials. And we really have tried to lead the charge at producing all of our materials in a bilingual format for both English and Spanish.
That's great. I really appreciate that. And if you need any help with that, please don't hesitate to let me know.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
And then I too have a couple, maybe more than a couple questions. So this whole record keeping process, is part of that just for you to identify when food scraps or food reuse doesn't go into the waste system? Is that, I'm assuming you have kind of some idea of what the total volume is of waste for organic food scraps, and you're basing actions on that. But then if you can carve out, show that some of it was reused, then you know what's actually going into the dump or not going into a recycled, an organic recycled process. Does that make sense?
I think so, Chair Jordan. The record keeping requirements, those updates are largely to measure the progress of implementing food recovery around the state of California. Okay. So, when it comes to disposal tonnages, we get a lot of data from all of the processing facilities we work with. But when food gets donated before it makes its way into our disposal system, we really don't have a lot of data to dive into. And that's where these donation details and the food recovery agreements are going to be able to help us monitor progress over time. But it's also going to allow us to work with certain entities that may have more capacity to do more. And we can leverage those relationships and really try to maximize food recovery as much as possible.
And other than some kind of tax credit, is there anything we're doing locally or can consider locally to incentivize somebody who's got whatever, some type of food that's still edible, maybe not the grade it came from the supplier, but we can help either reward those who are already doing that or incentivize those who just, it's more convenient to throw it in the yellow bin and forget about it, not do the record keeping. Is there anything on the horizon for us for that?
Chair Jordan, there's no incentives that I am aware of at this time, but our team, we do like to leverage our existing rates for solid waste. So every piece of food that is not being thrown in a yellow bin, that business, that entity isn't paying that disposal fee. So the more they can donate, they have that opportunity for the tax deduction, but then they're also saving on their bottom line by not paying for disposal services.
Got it. And then I'm assuming we've been knocking these off in terms of lowest hanging fruit and highest return, and single family residences are the last frontier eventually, right?
Absolutely, Chair Jordan. Our residential customers are required to receive organics recycling service. Thankfully, in our region, we have the new resource center up at the Tejigas landfill that was built. So all residential trash is being sorted, and that organics waste is being pulled out of the trash can and processed in the anaerobic digestion facility. So we are not going to see any large infrastructure changes in terms of services for single family homes. That's really a back-end processing thing that has happened over the last couple of months with the resource center opening.
When will we get to a point where it doesn't require sorting? And I have a brown bin, a couple blue bins, a couple green bins, and then a home yellow bin. Is that on the horizon?
Chair Jordan, I don't know that we're going to go back to, sorting a bunch of different cans. I think everyone's more interested in leveraging processing technology. Okay. But I do think it's a very interesting conversation around circular economy and extended producer responsibility. The more that we can push back the responsibility of solid waste management onto these larger companies producing products that we consume, potentially we'll be able to go back to a system like that and not have to do as much back-end processing, more curb sorting by the constituent.
Just kind of a personal question, but in the scheme of things, you know, like the those big round earth machine mulchers that the county sells at the transfer station. Okay, well, I'm a proud owner of about 6 of those, and 3 of them are in the chickens, and so they get food. But are we really in a position now where if you're doing your own organic food scraps recycling at home, are you more contributing to the problem rather than just sending it off to the county to have them put it through the proper digester? Is that the future?
Chair Jordan, I am a big proponent of backyard composting. Every piece of material that we pick up and haul up to process at that facility is incredibly expensive, and it does have these environmental impacts associated with hauling that material. So if you can degrade your organics and process them in a pile in your backyard, that's a huge win for a number of different reasons. And it's also going to allow you to manage that resource and use that compost on your own property in your garden, perhaps. So definitely looking at that food waste as a resource versus waste itself.
Great, thanks for letting me lead you off on a tangent there. So I don't see any other further questions. Happy to go to public comment and see if we have anybody who has questions for today's topic. Ms. Crisante?
Thank you, Chair Jordan. Currently, if you would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand within the Chair Jordan, I don't see anybody who would like to speak on this item.
Okay, then we will close public comment and bring it back for discussion and recommendations from the committee. Ms. Sneddon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair Jordan. I'm happy to move this forward, the staff recommendation. I think it's just in line with what we're already doing, and we've already made such great strides and investments toward this waste diversion, and this is just cleaning up the language and codifying. So I'm really happy to move staff recommendation.
Thanks.
I'll second that. I'll second that, Chair. And yeah, I think this is just another step to making our community as sustainable as possible. And I look forward to hearing my colleagues on the council discuss this.
Certainly agree, and we'll support that too. So Ms. Crisante, could we take a roll call vote, please?
Thank you. So we will move the staff recommendations to council. That was moved by Councilmember Sneddon, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez. Mayor Pro Tem Oscar Gutierrez.
Aye.
Councilmember Sneddon.
Yes.
And Chair Jordan.
And that's a yes for me also. So that will move forward then with everybody's support, and we will see it at council. And that's our only item today. So thank you for staff for a great presentation. Those of you that are lurking in the background too, great support and presentation from you too. And we will be adjourned. Thanks.